The Oscars are right around the corner, and with that said, every year I like to dive in and rank every Best Picture nominee from worst to best. Now, of course, we have 10 nominees to talk about. You may have a different entitlement to some of these films than I personally do, but that's what's so fun about doing these rankings. So make sure to leave your thoughts down below, hit that like, subscribe button, and without further ado, let's get into this ranking. And of course, coming down at my number 10, I mean, I'm not even going to spend too much time on this movie, but it's Emilia Perez. Whatever you want to say about this movie, I don't hate this movie as much as like most other people do, but I do hate that this film is even nominated. Like for me, the film's fine. It's decent. It's whatever. It's not as bad as what people say it is. Like when I went to go watch it, I watched it and I was like, oh, this is fine. But taking away some of the stuff that the cast has said, because I don't want to dive into that. I just specifically want to talk about the film. This film doesn't scream Best Picture nominee for me. Even when I was watching it, it didn't scream that either. I just never felt like this should have been nominated. It feels like Netflix had a ton of other films from last year they could have pushed, but this was the one they did. And I've always said that when it comes down to Oscar consideration, a lot of the time it does come down to how hard do studios push for movies. Emilia Perez is one of the movies that they pushed very hard for, and well, now it's nominated. For me, it is the villain of this award season. This is the one film that I just want it to go home empty-handed. It seems like Zoe Saldana is going to win Best Supporting Actress. Good for her. She's an amazing actress. She deserves an award caliber award finally, but I don't think it should be for this movie. And at my number 9, this one is going to be very much a toss-up for many people. I think some people might even have this way higher than me, but do not take this as I didn't like this movie. I really like this movie. I actually like it more and more the more I think about it, but I have only seen the film once, and that is Wicked. Wicked for me is a really damn good movie. It feels like a classic blockbuster in some way, shape, and form that we just wouldn't get nowadays, specifically in the way that it handles musicals, the world of Oz, and everything of that nature. This is far and above way better than Emilia Perez. Like Emilia Perez is down here, and then Wicked's like a height above. And I would say like Wicked and on up, all of these films I either really, really liked to love. And Wicked is just a film that I really liked. I didn't fall in love with it like many other people did, but I'm also not the musical type of guy. I don't love musicals all the time, but I can say that I appreciated Wicked for what it is. I think Ariana Grande is phenomenal in this. I think Cynthia Erivo is amazing as well. I think the Defying Gravity moment is one of the best parts in film from last year. I'm more just interested to see how part 2 does. And I think that's how some of these films work, is that, you know, you saw the first part, they left this giant cliffhanger. Where is part 2 going? And I think once I see part 2, if I do end up liking it, I might say I love my entire experience with Wicked. We get into my number 8, and this is the only other one that I've also only seen once, and that is I'm Still Here. This kind of got a surprise nomination out of nowhere. I wasn't really following this awards season, but when it did get nominated, I was like, that's the one. There's always that one international film that gets in that I'm like, that's awesome. I love that. And for me, I'm Still Here, when I finally did get to see it, is an emotional roller coaster. It's one that I wouldn't see myself going back to too often because of the ride that it does bring you about. But for me, Fernanda Torres does deserve that nomination. I think it's awesome that Brazil has this nomination in here. I also just think I'm Still Here is a great movie. This is one of those films that I wish I would have had more time to actually release an entire review about, but that's why it's in this ranking now. As I said, it's riveting. The performances are great. It is an emotional roller coaster. It's just one of those films that I just don't see myself going back to revisit, whether you say it is because of the emotional roller coaster you're on or just for other reasons. But I'm Still Here is a great movie, and if you didn't get to see it, you should. Then at my number 7 is Nickel Boys. Now, Nickel Boys I did do a review of, and no one watched it. No one watched it, but it also seems like no one watched the movie either. And this is one of those films that if it didn't get in, I wouldn't have been mad. If it did get in, I was going to be happy because I think this is a really great movie as well. Personally, would have rather had Sing Sing here or just Emilia Perez not be in here and Sing Sing get in. Nickel Boys for me is a movie that I didn't know what to expect going in. And the fact that it's an entire film told from the first person point of view is just something that either works or it doesn't. And I think for the way that this tells these stories of our two main characters, and in the way that the film dissects this time period, this time frame where these kids are at. It is devastating, but at the same time, I just said this about it, I'm Still Here, but it's an emotional roller coaster as well. And this is a movie that I appreciate. I think is cinema. I think this is one of those films that people will look back on and think is an important time frame and a cinematic achievement in some regards. I can't recommend Nickel Boys enough. Again, this one would have been a little bit higher. Just in personal reference, though, I have to put it somewhere. We get into my number 6, which is Conclave. Conclave, for me, just looked like Oscar bait. I wasn't too excited for it. I think Edward Berger is a really good director, but again, for me, there's just something about his directing. Like, I really liked All Quiet on the Western Front, but again, Oscar bait for me, and Conclave also looked like Oscar bait. And then I went and saw it, and it wasn't. Like, this movie is awesome. It is such an entertaining romp, and one that, again, on the surface looks like just that generic Catholic priest drama, and it ends up being like the toxicity of a voting poll as these cardinals vote for the next pope. And that may sound a little bit like, in regards, kind of confusing, and how do they do it, but they make it so easy to follow. And they make it timely in regards to our time frame and of the elections and everything like that. But also how, like, if you just know how the basic election works, then you also know how Conclave works. And also inside this film, the thing that I really loved was that it wasn't just about, oh, I think we should vote for this person. No, like, everyone has dirt to them, and everyone's kind of spewing it and spreading gossip. And the fact that Conclave showcases that no matter where you're at, whoever group you're in, or whatever it may be, there is still the same thing going around. Gossip, toxicity, and all that. And I thought Conclave was phenomenal. I thought Ralph Fiennes in this, phenomenal. Stanley Tucci, phenomenal. The rest of the cast, all fantastic. This is just one of those all-star films that has grown on me completely, and I loved Conclave. Before we get into my top 5, guys, make sure to leave your thoughts down below. Hit that like and subscribe button once again, and do look out for another video this week where I'm going to be going over which films I think will be, like, win the Oscar, but also I'm going to do in this video kind of like if I was voting for the Oscars, who I would have voted for. I'm definitely excited to do that video. This is one that I wanted to do last year, and I don't think I got to, so going to do it this year. And then, of course, Sunday night, you will be getting my Oscar reaction video where I'm going to film my reaction to every single award and then post my reaction for you guys. So have fun with that. Number 5 is A Complete Unknown. I absolutely love this movie, and I say this as someone who never really grew up with Bob Dylan. I like his music, I appreciate his music, but I was more just interested to see, like, what is going to be going on here, because Timothée Chalamet has spent like 5.5 years developing this entire persona of Bob Dylan. I think for me, like, Timothée Chalamet is one of the best and up-and-coming actors, if you even want to say up-and-coming anymore, and I would say, like, this guy is just fantastic, like, in any single thing that he's ever done. And A Complete Unknown just riveted me, like, from top to bottom. Yes, it is a musical biopic. Yes, it has the cliches here and there. Yes, it is overly long. But the fact that what I really loved from this film was, one, the performances all nailed down, the time period, and the real-life legends that the actors portrayed all work wonders in here, and all of them bring that to life. Of course, you have James Mangold directing this, and I think for me, James Mangold's direction is just, like, my cup of tea. Like, every time I see one of his movies, I always find myself, like, gravitating to that. Complete Unknown is one of those movies that I just have never forgotten about since my experience with it. It is one that I wish I would have had the time to see more and more, and get to see more in theaters, because it is one of those impeccable films. Again, it follows a cliche. It is a musical biopic, but as someone who never grew up with Bob Dylan, and for me to come away going, yeah, this is one of the best movies of last year, I mean, come on. It's like grown on me since. Like, the more and more I think about it, the more and more I just love A Complete Unknown. And a lot of that might be to the performances. Like I said, Timothée Chalamet is phenomenal here. Monica Barbeau, steals the show in almost every scene. Elle Fanning's amazing. Norton is so good. I think a lot of people, like, do not talk about him enough in this. And also, like, Boyd Holbrook. Him playing Johnny Cash in here, surprisingly great. Like, Boyd's great in everything he's always in, but I didn't expect him to nail Johnny Cash that well. We get into my number 4, and this is The Brutalist. I think once we get 4 and up, these for me, I think can classify as like basically masterpieces. And I think The Brutalist, I am ready to say, is a cinematic masterpiece. It is a film that deserves your attention. It is a film that deserves to be studied for years, and specifically, it is one of the best movies of last year. I think in terminology and everything that was nominated and where things are heading, The Brutalist should win Best Picture. Yes, is it a safe pick? Yes, sure. But for me, the thing with The Brutalist is the fact that it details such an experience of an immigrant coming over after World War II. And again, making it feel timely, making it feel relevant to today's standards, but also at the same time, making this film just a gut punch. Every single moment, you are riveted from top to bottom, and I think a lot of that is because of Brady Corbett's direction. I think his direction in here is phenomenal as well, but the score rivets you from top to bottom. Adrian Brody possibly gives the best performance of his entire career. Felicity Jones is amazing in here as well. Guy Pearce is scary good. So much said about The Brutalist that I just agree with almost every single piece of it, that this is, again, a cinematic achievement. Everything that accomplished behind the scenes, and when you look into that and how it parallels to what the film was made, and the fact that, like, Adrian Brody is playing like this renowned architect, and in a way, when you look at the entire film, the way that it's structured, it feels like an architect had to structure this movie, because it is a work of art when you display it on just everything else. It is something that should be held up to a podium. I love The Brutalist. If it wasn't for personal opinion, this would be a lot higher on this list. But my top 3 were some of my favorite films of last year as well. Gets into my number 3, and I honestly, when I saw this film last year, I did not think it would be nominated for anything, but I loved my experience, and I was hopeful, but it got nominated. The director, Corley Fargett, deserves all of this, and that is The Substance. The Substance, for me, is probably my favorite horror movie of this decade so far. It goes back and forth between this and Talk to Me, but there's something special about The Substance that I have never been able to take out of my head, whether it's the experience that Corley gave to me, or maybe it's all the gore and blood and guts, but it really is the message that takes away of, like, we are our own worst villain. And I know that, like, the concept that has happened before, and like those parallels and thematics have been shown in film before, but I think the way that The Substance like displays it, like, really much makes me look into the mirror. And even like that scene where Demi Moore is just wiping off her makeup and putting it back on and wiping off her makeup, even though there's nothing terrifying in that moment to like us as the audience on like a surface level, the psychological level and the nature of that scene is devastating. And I think for me, The Substance is a terrifying movie at that. It makes us look at our own inner self and makes us look at all the stuff that we go through on a daily basis. So what do we put ourselves through to get to that position that we want to be in? I found The Substance to, again, not just be a terrifying experience in terms of body horror and grossed out nature of what you're about to experience and see, but also in terms of that psychological nature and what it makes us feel and display as, again, we look at ourselves as the worst villain. If anyone's ever looked in the mirror and hated themselves for whatever reason it may be, look, something you've done, The Substance for me is going to be a film that you relate to heavily. Demi Moore is phenomenal in this. I go back and forth if she should win or if Mikey Madison should win, but both of them are phenomenal. I'd be happy with whoever won. Margaret Qualley should have been nominated for this movie. She is, again, the other half of Demi Moore in this and is also fantastic. This, again, if you still have not seen The Substance, please put it on your list. I'm trying to be vague as possible with certain things because this is the film that if you don't know anything about, that is the best way to experience it. Now we get into my number 2, and this is Anora. Anora for me is Sean Baker's best movie yet. It is one part Pretty Woman, one part Uncut Gems, all parts a devastating tale of rags to riches, but also it is Anora's princess tale, just not the one that she expected. And that is the thing that I loved about Anora, is that what starts out as like a fun comedy with a lot of sex and romance to it, I guess you want to say that, but it's a lot more sex, and it does display sex workers in some sort of light that some people might like, some people might not. But Anora for me, like, it was never about that. that captured that. What Sean Baker captures here, and what he always does so well in his films, is capture like an industry or a protagonist that like either is not likable at all, or you can like the hell out of them, but their situation may not be to the most appealing thing to the general going audience. And Anora, what I loved here was the way that it did kind of give love to an industry that is frowned upon. But then when you're paying attention to the entire film, you see what Anora wants. And I say princess tale for a reason, because she always wanted that Disney princess story. And I'm not going to get into spoilers, but to see how much she wants that, to where it kind of shoots back down, it's devastating. It absolutely is devastating. And for me, I found Anora to just be a masterpiece. I laughed. I almost cried. But I was in an absolute roller coaster the entire way through. And I think Mikey Madison gives one of my favorite performances of this decade so far. I think the entire supporting cast as well is great. I really can't express enough. Like, this film is something special, and I think it is Sean Baker's best film yet. If it wins everything, good for it. If it doesn't win everything, well, depending on who wins, I won't be mad, but Anora deserves a lot of love. Number one, if you watched my best of the year, you probably expected this, but my number one's Dune Part 2. Nothing was beating this. And for me, this film should have gotten a heavier awards push. This film should have been nominated in all categories. I genuinely mean almost every single category. Even best score, where they said it was ineligible. I genuinely mean that, but like, for me, while I love A Complete Unknown, I think that's Timothée Chalamet's best performance. I also think he should have been nominated for Dune Part 2. I think Zendaya should have been nominated for Dune Part 2. I think Javier Bardem should have been nominated for Dune Part 2. I think Rebecca Ferguson. I think Austin Butler. The list goes on and on of all the nominations that I think this film should have gotten, and specifically Denis Villeneuve for Best Director. Dune Part 2 is an inexplicit masterpiece. It is one of the best films I have ever experienced. It's one of the best sci-fi journeys I've ever experienced. And it is a movie that I fucking love. I love with such a hard and high passion that it breaks my heart, of like when I was doing my Oscar nominee reactions and saw bullshit happen. So this is one of the best films of the decade. This is one of the best experiences. I mean, the cinematography is impeccable. The story is great. I can't wait to see Dune Messiah. And I know some people are like, well, just wait till Dune Messiah. Like, that's when they're going to give Denis his love. I don't believe it. I don't believe it. I hope I'm wrong, but I think Dune's just going to be one of those films that like Denis doesn't get anything for. And then like in 10 years, Denis will get some honorary Oscar award, or maybe he'll finally win Best Director for some smaller scale movie. But Dune deserves everything. I think the fact that you're even making a brand new sci-fi franchise in this market is even huger, and the fact that like you would say Dune is bigger than Star Wars right now in some regards, I think that is true. So yeah, Dune Part 2, best film nominated at the Oscars this year. Definitely leave your thoughts down below. Hit that like, subscribe button, and of course, until next time, stay classy.